In today's video, we're going to take our player and add a basic experience system that allows us to level up and increase our attack and defense, and we'll even make it so that that means we do more damage to the enemies that we fight. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. Alright, so to begin this, I want to give a little bit of a preface because, you know, when we're talking about building stats and things like that for our game here, the expectations or the requirements for your individual game might be wildly different than what I'm going to build here. I've given this some thought, and rather than try and build a really robust RPG system with this game, I thought I would do something simple, and that's kind of for two reasons. And one is because the current game design was never intended to support a robust leveling system. That doesn't mean we couldn't put one in, but you know, it just isn't designed like the way we have hearts for the health on our player and things like that. But also because I want to just do something that's a little bit more bite-sized so that we're not getting something that's really hairy and hard to manage. So we're going to just build something with just a couple statistics. We're going to have an attack stat and a defense stat that go along with our hit points. And of course, we'll have a player level and experience. And so that's really going to be the extent of what we're going to build right now with the action RPG. And then I would like to do more, but in the future, I'll probably do that on a separate project where we just explore the ins and outs of making a leveling system. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. We don't really need any new assets to begin. Everything that we're going to do is just going to be building on what we've already got. So let's just go ahead, and I'm doing this kind of fast and loose this time. I don't have a script to follow. I do have some notes about what I want to do and how I want to do it, but nothing real concrete. So I want to look at the player. Now we have built into our player a few things, like we've got our hit points and max hit points, and I want to also look at the player manager because that's pretty tightly coupled with how we handle the player in this game. So in the globals, I'm just going to find that player manager script. Now in the past with our quest bit, we added this XP value here, and I want to move this to the player, and there's a specific reason. I just want to keep all of the stats that are going to be tracked or affect how the game plays within one script. So I'm going to move XP to the player. Our player will also need another variable for his level, which should just be an integer, and we'll default it to 1. And then I mentioned two others. We're going to have an attack and a defense, right? Now these could be floats, and they could still be, you know, integer values and still a float type, and that might be preferable for your game depending on what you're doing. But I'm going to stick with integer because that's kind of how I've built everything else. So these are the values that we're going to add. We've got a level, experience points, attack, and defense. So I've added those to my player script. Let's go back to the player manager though. You can see we've got some errors after I saved because we did have a function here in our player manager that rewards experience points. We pass in the experience, and we use this in our quest system. When you complete a quest, it has like an experience reward value associated with it. And this is the function that we're using to update that value. Really, all we need to do is just come over here to XP and just go to player.xp. And of course, this value here is also found on the player. And this is just a debug, so you could also just remove this line of code altogether. It doesn't serve any purpose other than printing it to the console, of course. All right. I want to start with the player experience points because we need to make sure that we have a way to add them aside from completing quests so it's easy to test. We could do this with some debug stuff. Alternatively, what I would like to do is just add some quick code to our enemies so that they support rewarding experience when they're defeated. All right, so let's find that enemy. Now, because our enemies have been built in a somewhat modular way, this is actually going to be pretty easy. So I'm just going to come down to my enemies folder and find the enemy script, open that up. We only export a hit point value on the enemy. Let's just add an export value for the reward XP that the player should be rewarded. I'm going to call it XP reward. And I'm going to just set that to 1 by default. You're going to have to determine what's appropriate for your game. So when we save this and let's open one of our enemies. So let's see, let's just look at the slime, for example. When I select the slime, you can see there's now an XP reward. The slimes are harder to kill. I'm going to give them a reward value of 10. Our goblin I'll just leave alone, so he'll be given the default of 1. So we need to hook this up so that we actually give the player an XP reward, of course. And the place where we handle item drops and things like that on our enemies is actually within the destroy state. So looking at the slime here, I've got my destroy state. You could also find that in your enemy scripts. It's going to be under your states there, right? So just find it and open it. Now within this state, when we enter this state, we do a few things like we play animations, but we drop items here. Let's go ahead and just give some experience to the player in this script. And really it's as simple as just calling the player manager, because we've got that function reward XP within our player manager. So we just need to do this and then pass in the enemy's XP reward value, and we're good to go. So this is going to go ahead and do that for us. So now I think if we run the game and go fight a goblin, we should get 1 experience. And I'm going to go ahead and just shrink this down a little bit so I can just see my output console a little bit better. Okay, so if I kill a goblin, you can see down there we've got XP equals 1, right? That meant we got that reward. And XP is now 2. So now if we kill a slime, it should go up by, what did we set it to, 10? So it should go up to like 12. There we go. Okay, so that's working, right? It's incrementing and it's being stored on our player. So there's a couple things we need to do here, right? First of all, we need to make it so that we're actually tracking this and we can level up the player. It would be nice to display it, so we should add it to the player's UI, maybe in the inventory type screen in that area. And we need to make it so we can save that data when we save our game. So let's tackle those one at a time. And I think it would be good to start with the UI, even though I mentioned that one in the middle, because that will give us a good visual feedback within the game without having to output to the console. So let's go ahead. Now that our enemy gives us experience, I'm going to find, let's see, my UI. So in this pause menu is where we're going to look. Within the pause menu, if I go ahead and activate my inventory screen, we've got space in here. And eventually this is going to have all sorts of stuff because we're going to add some basic equipment. So let's begin adding some new things to our inventory or to our pause screen. Underneath the inventory tab, we may want to rename that to something like character. But for now, I'm fine with inventory. I'm going to go ahead and just add underneath here some containers. I'm going to start with a VBox container. So I'm going to have a list of stats, and then each stat's going to consist of 2 labels. Okay, so within this VBox container, let me add an HBox container now. So VBox contains the list of stats. Let me drag this over. And each HBox will contain an individual stat. Now I just add a label here. And let's put some text in. The first stat we'll want to show is maybe the level. Okay. And then if I duplicate that, I'll just leave it as label 2. That's fine. In this second thing, for now, I'll just put 1. But this is obviously where we're going to display that level that the player has. Okay. So each of these will look kind of like this. I want to give these containers a little bit of size, like a minimum size, so that there's consistency to the spacing, and I want to do that with this set of labels first so I can just duplicate it and inherit those values. So I'm going to give a custom minimum width on the number of like 40, and I'm going to set the alignment to right. And then if I look at the label, I want to make sure that the label, right, is we have a longer or shorter label for this stat. I don't want it to decrease or increase and cause indentation issues. So I'm going to give this a minimum width as well. I think 50 might be good. Let's go 60. So we can get a little bit longer than level. Okay, so now if I just duplicate this container, actually, hold on, before we duplicate it, I feel like the label for the stat should be dimmed, and then the actual value should be bright and be white. So let's just style this up a little bit. Why not? I'm going to come in here to my theme overrides. We can do a font color. I usually do modulate. I guess I'm breaking from patterns here. And then, I don't know, we'll pick kind of like a a browny, yellow, orange color, kind of go with the theme of this, right? And that looks fine. I want to put a font shadow on these two. I think that'll look nice. So I'm going to go ahead and go to label 2, and I'm just going to come to the overrides and just add a font shadow to this one. We don't need to change the color. Okay, you can see we've got a little drop shadow now on those. That'll just help them stand out a little bit. Now we could put this set of UI inside of a box, kind of like this. That might be nice to do. Let's go ahead and just do that actually. So I've got this panel container. If I duplicate the panel container and then just delete its contents, now I've got a little panel container over here. Then I can put this VBox container inside of it. There we go. I'll just drag this panel container over. And that already looks decent. I mean, I'm not going to complain. There we go. We've got level. Now, I guess what we should do, though, is we should, this container is filling the panel container. So you'll notice if I like resize this, I could resize it to be the size of those, the H box that I set. It's not going to let me go smaller. So I think that looks fine. I suppose it doesn't balance on the page, but I'm not sure exactly. Again, didn't plan this as much as my normal videos. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of drag it over. In fact, I don't like how this is positioned. I'm a stickler for layout. I want margins and paddings and everything to look consistent. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab these and drag them down. So I'm getting a similar spacing here on the top and the left. Now I can grab my panel container too. I could do the same. That's kind of ugly though, isn't it? Maybe I'll do something like this. See, eventually I'm thinking we'll have like equipment and it'll affect the stats. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. So maybe this is what we should do. Maybe we should take our label here and change the minimum size. Maybe we should really adjust this. And we could start by taking our panel container and just making it big enough to kind of fill the box how we want to. So if I try and keep the spacing consistent around, you could do this precisely with math. I'm just doing it by eye. Good enough. Okay, so that's filling. This is filling. Now I just need to adjust how this works. So I could just make this label 2. Let me go to label 1. And we can go to this container sizing and turn on expand. Boom, that fixed the problem. Now that doesn't really matter what the minimum width is now. It's just going to expand. Obviously it wouldn't get smaller than 60 pixels, but it's expanding. And then most of our values aren't going to be big in a game like this. I mean, if you were going to have where the player could get like attack of like 9,999, you might want this box to be bigger, but for this example, it's fine. And that's easy to adjust, right? And in fact, by doing expand with this label, let me just point out, if we were to change the minimum size of this one to 60, you can see that it will grow and it will just cause this other one to decrease. So, I mean, again, it's really flexible. And as someone who's done a lot of work with web and WPF and other types of UI, I got to give it to the developers at Godot who have worked on the UI system, because in my opinion, it's kind of world class. It's about as good as it gets. I know there's always a little bit of kludginess with any kind of system, and there's some weird things maybe with the Godot UI, but I think it's awesome. Okay, rant over. So there we go. We've got our level. Let's go ahead and take this HBox container, and I'm going to duplicate it for each stat. So we've got level, experience, attack, and defense. There we go. Okay, so I just duplicated that. Now I just need to come in here and just maybe rename these. We called XP, attack, a task. A task for me is to get better at typing. Okay. Defense, something like that. Okay, there we go. We've got our stats laid out. And you know, later we might choose a smaller font for these so it takes up less space, but there we have it. Okay. If we run our game and just make sure that this works, it should, because of the way we've built it. But there we go. Our inventory now has our stats, and they're not anything that you can select, but that's fine. They don't need to be. So let's add a script. I think a nice way to handle this would be to have a script specifically for these values. So I'm going to go in here into my inventory And scripts folder, Let's do this. Let's make a new folder. And I'll just call it stats. And maybe what we should do is take our entire panel container. I'm going to call it stats. And we'll just save it as a scene. So save branches scene. And then I'll just save it in there in that pause menu stats folder. There we go. It's called stats. Awesome. So now it's a little standalone scene that we've got. Okay. And one other thing we could do, because I positioned it before we saved it, it's got its position in here. That's probably not ideal. So sorry to be all over the place with you guys, but let's go ahead and just reset this. So I'll just go to the transform. Where is it? Position. Reset that to 0, 0. Then when we come back to the pause menu, we'll just have to drag this over again. And voila. It's not lined up, is it? There we go. Okay. So now that we've created a unique scene off of this, now we can kind of just work with it. It'll be a little bit easier. I'm going to just come, we could create a new folder for scripts, but I think we're just going to have the one script and the one scene. So I'm just going to simply attach a script to the scene and let's go. So this new script, let's give it a class name in case we ever want to access it. And extending panel container is fine. I don't really care too much for that, but I mean, it's just a control. Now what we need on this is we need to grab a reference to the labels that we need to update. You could go through and rename all these. I don't know that that's super necessary, but I am going to grab these 4 labels. They're all labeled 2s, right? And these are the labels that we're going to update. So the first one was the level. So I'll just change it to label _ level. And then this one was XP, attack, and defense. Okay, so we have access to those. We can update them. What I'd like to do is if we look at our pause menu, right? I think it has a signal. Yeah, shown. We probably need to connect to that so we can update the stats anytime we show the menu. And then we're good to go. So let's come in here into this script. Let's set up our ready function. And since our pause menu is a singleton, it's a global, right? It's globally loaded. We can just access it like this: pause menu .shown .connect. And then of course we need a function. We'll just call it update stats. And then we'll create the function. We don't need to pass any arguments into this, right? Just a simple function. And what it's going to do is we want to grab our player and just check his stats and update the labels accordingly. So it's really straightforward. So let's start by just getting a reference to our player. This makes the code just a little bit easier to read. You could access it directly through the PlayerManager, each line of code, but why not? Why not save us a little bit of code, make it easier to read? So we'll start by grabbing the PlayerManager.player and assigning it to this _p value that we'll use. So we've got, let's see, first label that we need to update is the level. So label _ level, and that's really weird, .text equals. And for this one, we need to convert it, because it's an integer, we need to convert it to a string. And so we'll just grab our player's level value. Okay. Now I'm going to copy this line of code and just paste it 3 more times. Okay, so then we're going to have XP. Yep. And then we've got, let's see, this one will be our attack stat and our defense stat. Okay. And then obviously we need to update which labels we're assigning the value to. So that'll be our XP, attack, and defense. There we go. So theoretically, this should work, although the only thing that's really going to change in the game is the XP, but let's run and see if our XP values update as we defeat enemies. So we'll start by checking our, oh, it was already there. XP, 0. That's good, right? We defaulted it to 1, but obviously we're starting a fresh game. We haven't done anything yet, so there's 0 experience points. And we should have 1 now. There we go. So I'll just kill a few guys just to double check this, but it seems like it's working. Okay, so that should be 2, and then I'll kill a slime. All right, 12 experience points. Excellent. So that's working. Pretty simple, straightforward code, right? It doesn't save or load yet. So let's go ahead and handle the save and the load next. So this little video we're taking a tour of our systems and making updates, right? So the save and load happens in another global. So if I go to my global scripts and find the global save manager, this is where we need to update to make it save these statistics. And the first thing we want to do actually is just update this save dictionary that we have. So we've got our player, we've got hit points, max hit points, and a position. So really what we should do is we should add a couple values in here. So we want a level value, set it equal to 1 by default. Oops, somehow I accepted that. Okay. And then we need an XP value, which will default to 0. And we also want, I'm just trying to keep these organized in kind of some sort of order. We want our attack and defense values in here, right? And dang it, I don't want new. And we just need to make sure that we're setting these to whatever they would be when you start a new game. So you could adjust those as you see fit. Okay, so there we go. We've got those values added to our current save dictionary. So now when we save the game, those are going to get saved out. So we need a way to update them. And when we load a game, we need a way to apply them back to the player. We have a function called update player data. And this is what we use when we're saving. We call this to set the data in our save, and we call that right before we save it. So in save game, we update player data, update scene and item and quest data, and then we save it. Okay, so let's just go back then to this update player data. We just need to add some code in here so that we can grab those new values that we have. So the new values are level, experience, attack, and defense. Okay, so we'll just grab our current save dot player dot this is level equals, and then you can see we've already got a variable to access our player here. It's just called p, so we'll say p.level, and then we'll just do the same for the other values. Okay, so that is going to update those and save them. We could just test and read our JSON file, but I'd rather hook up the load because that was pretty minimal work, and loading the game isn't much more work either. So let's go to our load game function in this script, and we can see that we're getting our JSON file and parsing it, loading the level that we need to, and then in between the level load started and the level load end, we update our player. All we're doing currently is setting his position and his health. So we just want to add in these new values that we want to set. I'm going to add them right in here next to this because it goes along with those. So we have our player manager, and here what we need to do, right, is just the reverse. We need to set our players, and you know, maybe we should get a reference to our player like we've done actually. That might be nice. Let's go look at that code. Update player data, just grab that line of code where we set the reference to our player. Okay, so now we can replace all of that with P. And so what do we start with? Our level. And we're just going to set our level to the current save. It's just the opposite of what we just did. So we've got current save.player.level, just like that. Okay, and so I'm going to copy that line of code, paste it. And of course, we've got XP, attack, and defense. And we just need to update the left part of these equations as well. And there we go. So now if we run our game, we should be able to save it. So if I look right now and, well, I mean our inventory here, right? In our screen, we've got 0 XP, etc. It's not really worth testing now, although we could save it and let's just kill a guy. So now I've got 1 XP, and if I load, we should be back to 0. Awesome. And likewise, if I kill several enemies and I've got some experience points, I should be able to see that save. Okay, yeah, we've got 12 experience points now. I'm going to just clear this whole little area. Nice. 32 experience points. What am I to do? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save it here so I don't have any enemies fighting me. Save it. Now, if I come back here and, well, let's quit and we'll load again. Okay, ran the game new, no experience. Load it. There we go, 32 experience. Now, obviously, it would be saving the level and the attack and the defense as well, but we're just not modifying those currently, so there's no change to save. But we'll get there. Okay, looking good. Okay, so now that we've come this far, let's just look at our game and talk about this. Things are working. We need a way so that we can level up, and then that hopefully will increase our attack and defense, and it could increase your hit point value, you know, whatever you want to do. So I think once we've done that, we've pretty much wrapped up all the basics we need to kind of understand how to work this level system. So let's go ahead and handle these things. I want to go back to our scripts, and I'm going to close the enemy. We're not using that anymore. We don't need our save manager anymore. And I've got a couple other things that have been popped open as we've been clicking around. Okay, so our global player manager, this is the script I want, I believe. Because if we think about it, this is the one where we are rewarding experience points. Yeah, we've got this reward XP function. And let's just come in here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. We don't need that print. Here we'll do a check for level advancement. Okay. Now there's a couple ways you could do this. Ideally, you'd probably have a little bit of more of a complex set of data that you could use for this that would encompass things like experience values required to gain a level, right? So like at level 2, how much experience do you have to get that? And we'll do that. But then you might also want like, okay, their stats should be this, that, and the other thing per level. Or what we're going to do is just implement a blanket increase of 1 value per stat per level. Okay. So there's obviously lots of ways you could do this. So you're just going to have to figure out what you want to do in your game and use this code and build on it. So the one thing that we'll do is let's just go to the top of our script here and let's create a variable that I'm going to call level requirements. Okay. And this is going to be probably the simplest, most boilerplate way you could do this. Okay. Because obviously you could have like each level requirement, like I said, it could have other things that go with it. But all we're going to do here is have an array of elements, and each index of this array is going to match up with a level. Okay. So we'll start, let's pad this with a 0, because obviously when we start the game, players at level 1, we don't need to level them up to level 1. So we'll just ignore that. And then we can just set some values, and I'm going to just set some values that might seem kind of arbitrary. I'll type them in here. So these values, right, like this is to get to level 2, to level 3, and so on. And I just kind of double them, but I took some liberties to pick some fun values so that it, you know, every now and then it mixes it up. And this is assuming that maybe the max level in my game is 11. I don't know. So here's how we're going to use this to check. I'm going to come down here to the reward XP function. And to check for level advancement, we'll do just a simple if statement. So every time we get XP, we'll check. Is our experience value greater than the next, the requirement to level up for this level? So how that works is, again, at level 1, it's actually the index. If we were to look at the index of this, level 1 is right here. So the level requirement to level up in level 1 is 50. Once you hit 50 points, you'll advance to level 2, right? That's how that's going to work. And then once your level is 2, this is the next experience threshold it's going to check. So we'll just say because we've already updated the player XP value, we'll check our player XP. So if player.xp is greater than or equal to, right? Because if you hit that value, you level up. If it's greater than or equal to, and we'll look at our, level requirements, and the index the value we want to look at is going to be the player level. Okay. So if it's greater than or equal to that value, which is going to be 50, then we're going to level up the player. The first thing we can do is just say player.level plus equals 1. And then again, now you might have something more complex built in here, but what I'm going to do is just increase the attack and the defense by 1. And then I would like to emit a signal here, because one thing I've learned in the past is that we should probably anticipate when we have signals that might be useful. And, you know, if we create a signal that we never connect to, I think that's fine. But it's nice to create the signal now so that in the future when we're like, hey, I want this new node to be able to react to the player leveling up, we already have a signal in place. So let's go ahead and create a signal for this. So up with my signals, we'll have, we can just call it player leveled up. Okay, so now we can just emit the signal when we level up. And there we go. So then what should happen here is we should actually be able to level up to level 2 and just test that. So let's run the game. And I'm going to load my save where I've got 32 experience. So I should be able to just defeat a couple more slimes and level up. Okay, we're at 42. Oh, I'm so bad. And we leveled up. Level is 2. Attack and defense are 2, and you can see our experience had surpassed that level cap. All right. Let's do one more thing before, and in fact, let's test this. Let's go back and save it. You know, we do have a flawed save system because I don't want to save in here. I don't want to save right where a slime spawns or something. I think ideally, if it were me for this game and for this style of game, I would have certain save locations. That's just me. Okay, so I've saved the game. Let's just make sure when we load that all this is still working. It should be just fine. There we go. Yep, we've got our level 2, our experience, our attack, and our defense all saved. So that's working. Now, the one thing that's obvious though is our attack hasn't changed. So if our attack is 2, we should be stronger. And still takes 3 hits to kill a slime. And if our defense goes up, maybe we should take less damage, but these guys aren't very strong. So we're going to have to do a little bit more to be able to test that. Okay. Let's begin with the player attack. That's fairly straightforward, but it might not be obvious how to do it. Fortunately, I do think the way that I've structured this project, it's fairly trivial and pretty straightforward. So I'm going to look at the player. Let's look at the player scene and think about this for a second. We've got in here, let's see, underneath our sprite, that's where I want to go. We've got some hurt boxes. You know, a previous comment, these should be called hit boxes, I don't know. But anyways, we've got these boxes. We've got one, there's 1 damage. This is activated when our player attacks, okay, and it moves around. We've got one that is when our sword is poking straight out. Its damage is set to 0, and I want to keep that because this is just meant to poke an enemy but not damage them, and so that's kind of just a weird little mechanic in its own way. And that's fine, we'll leave that at 0. We also have the charge spin, which I have set to do 3 damage right now. I think 2 might be more appropriate for level 1. And we got to think about how we want to do this. This is where, you know, your game design becomes really important. Like, you know, how are you going to handle these damage values? Is a spin attack, charge spin, is it 3 times the damage of your regular attack? That might get really OP late in a late game. I would say 2 times is still even potentially OP. Maybe 1.5, but let's just go with 2. So I'm going to just set this to 2 for now. And then what we want to do is go into our player script, and we just need a simple way to update these when the player levels up. And so let's just create a simple function to do that for us. And, you know, at the risk of making our player script file get really big, I'm going to go ahead and build it in here. Alternatively, you could build it outside of this, but I think it makes sense in here because It's going to be a simple function, and we only need to run this on the occasions when our player levels up. So we'll just call it update damage values. And actually, we'll call it when our player levels up, but we're also going to need to call this when, our player loads or when we load the game. Okay, so this is going to be a simple function, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these two hurt boxes, the attack and the charge spin. I'm not going to grab this charging hurt box. I'm just going to drag these in. I'm not even going to get a reference to them in the script because I don't think we need to. We just put them on separate lines. We know that these have a damage value, so we're just going to set this. And the attack will be equal to the attack value. And then later when we add equipment into the equation, we can update how this update damage values works. For now, it's just tied directly to the player's statistics, his attack stat. That changes when he levels up. And same with the spin, except this one, right, here's where you have to fill in your own equation. I'm going to do attack times 2. And that's what I'm going to go with. You may play test this, as you're getting a longer game where you level up more and find that that's totally inappropriate. But, you're just going to have to figure that out. Okay. But I think times 2 is good. Okay. So there we go. So now we have a way to set these. And how often should we be setting this and when is the other question we need to ask ourselves, right? And there's a few ways we could do this. I think the one thing we need to do is we should always just call this in our ready function, just so we know that we're setting those up initially in the game. So I'll just call update damage values. Now, we could call this, one way we could do this actually is we have a signal that we created in our player manager, right? And it's the player leveled up. And we could connect this to our update damage values. And that'll work pretty good, actually. And if we want, we could test that. But I'm going to just show you something. When we run our game, if I load this, actually, I want to do something here. So that we can test this easily. Let me go to, I guess it's like level 3. Let me open, or level 1 maybe. Let me find that real quick. Okay, yeah, this is the level with some... I'm going to take this one goblin up here, and I'm just going to override his XP reward, set it to 50, so I can kill him to level up instantly. And I want to show you why. Because once we have leveled up and we do 2 damage, Slime has 3 hit points, we should be able to kill him in 2 hits instead of 3. So let me just go ahead and run this with that change. Let's test this. Let's test it by going and trying to kill a slime, even though I think it's obvious, right, what's going to happen here. But 1, 2, 3 hits. Okay. Now if I come here and level up. Yep, I leveled up. Now I should, because I leveled up, not only should I have new attack, but now that should have updated my actual attack values. Perfect, it worked. But let me show you something. If I load my game, I have level 2 and attack of 2. But if I go and fight one of those slimes, oh, it actually worked. I didn't think it was going to work. In fact, it didn't work though. Let me show you. Because we're not actually updating the player attack when we load a game. So it had maintained the attack of 2, even though we don't handle it. So if I show you right now, if I load my game, okay, I should have an attack of 2 now. But because I loaded this on a fresh load of the game, my player's attack was set to 1, and I loaded it, it said 2, but watch, it's going to take 3 hits. And that's because this code that we have, this way of handling it, where are we at? Player. Connecting to the level up only happens when the player levels up, right? And so this isn't an ideal way to handle these damage values. We need to be able to respond to other events. And so what I want to do here, let's check this error. I think it's my animation frame error that I haven't cleaned yet. Yeah. Okay. I really need to clean that one. I think I thought I did, and I know we've had some users who know where it is. For some reason, it always creeps in with me. Okay, let's see. So what we need to do is, I think the best way is to have a setter. Anytime we change the attack on our player, then we need to have a setter function so that we can call that, right? So we'll just say set something like this, okay? So we're gonna just set the, obviously we've used setters before, but just add, what you do is you just add a colon after you have your value here, or if you don't set it, you could just have a colon after. I keep hitting page down. You could just have a colon, wherever, right? And then put a setter function after it. And the setter function is going to have an argument of whatever the new value is. So the first thing we can simply do is just say attack equals V. Okay. And then all we need to do after that is just call update damage values. Just like that. And now anytime we update the attack, whether it's from the save game or leveling up, it should update those damage values. So let's just run the game. And if I load it, we're level 2, attack of 2. I should be able to kill slime in 2 hits now. All right. Let me get this mouse out of the way. Cool, 2 hits. And likewise, if I level up one more time, I should be able to kill it, I think, in 1 hit, right? That'll be the next attack will be 3. So that guy, I think 100 is what I needed. Yeah, level 3, attack 3. So now if I come back to fight a slime, boom, 1 hit. Awesome. Now, obviously, it should take a lot longer to get that much stronger in the game. So you got to balance your level curves. How much experience are you getting from each enemy? And what, how much are you increasing your attack? Maybe you don't want your attack to increase every level. Maybe it's every other, or, come up with your own scheme for that, and you can code that up. I'm going to go ahead and close this. But I want to update our UI because simply, I just want to be able to see how much more experience I need until the next level. Okay, so right now we're only showing our current experience points. As a player, I want that carrot. What do I need? How far until my next level, right? So let's look at the script here. And where we update the level, all we need to do is just include some extra values in our string here. So I'm going to start by adding a slash. So it'll be, like XP 0 out of whatever, 50 is the first level, right? But how are we going to get that? And we have it. Let's look at our player manager. We have this level requirements, these values, right? So we just want to display whatever the current target is. So if we're level 1, it's 50. If we're level 2, it's 100. And just like our check to see if we're leveling up, in fact, let's go back to the player manager and let's look at this, set reward XP. See this right here, level requirements at the player level? I'm going to copy that. We just want that same value. I'm just going to come in here and I need to start with player manager dot, and then if I paste that, and of course this is giving us an error. It's going to give us an error for 2 reasons. One is we don't have the player defined in such a way, but we could go _p. And then also this is going to eventually give us an error because we need to convert this value to a string as well. It's an integer. We can't assign an integer in this way. So there we go. If I convert that to a string. So now if I run the game, at first you can see it requires, I have 0 experience out of 50. If that doesn't make sense, or if you want to change it, you could have another line. You could do whatever you want, but that's how we can display the experience to the next level. And then if I go here and load my game, it should reflect, yeah, we're level 2, and in order to level up, we need 100 now. Okay, so we're at 52 out of 100. And that's how we're going to build that. And so, nice. I just leveled up, right? So there we go. Okay, next, let's deal with the defense. I thought we were almost done, and then I was like, oh, shoot, our defense. What are we going to do with our defense? Let's go to our player script. We need a way to just take the defense into account, right? Obviously, this is going to change. We don't have any nodes in our player that would look at a defense value currently, right? In fact, the only place that we deal with taking damage is within this player script. So let's look at the take damage function. Okay, if we're invulnerable, we don't do anything. If our hit points are greater than 0, then we take damage. And what we need to do is we need to just adjust this so that we can subtract the damage value from whatever damage we're taking, or we can subtract the defense value, excuse me, from whatever damage we're taking. And again, you could adjust this as you want to. Maybe you've got a complex algorithm. I'm going to do simple subtraction. So if your defense is 1 and you take 1 damage, then maybe it does 0. I think taking 0 damage, though, is a bad idea in a game. I think we should limit the amount that you can reduce to 1, so you can't reduce below 1 damage. So you're always going to take 1 damage. But then maybe if an enemy does 2 or 3 damage, now your defense starts to kick in, right? So let's do one thing real quick before we determine how to handle that in here. And let's go to one of our enemies and make them do more damage. And in fact, I'm going to use the goblin, even though he's wimpy. I think he's a good one. Where's goblin? Where's enemies? Boom, 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 boom. E, enemies, goblin. There we go. So if I'm looking at the goblin, actually, I think the goblin can do 2 damage sometimes if he's like poking with his spear. He does 1 damage. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something. Let's look at this chase state. Oh yeah, we're getting in it. We have an attack area, a different hurt box. Is that what we're doing here? You know, it's been so long since I worked on this, I can't remember exactly what we did, but let me just look through this a little bit more. So we've got these. Here we go. We've got an attack hurt box. The damage is 2. Okay. So if he pokes us with the spear, let's go ahead and test that so that it's obvious, right? If he pokes us with the spear, it'll take 2 damage, which will be a full health. Boom. Yeah, that's different because if we get hit by a slime, he does 1 damage, half a heart. Okay. So 1 damage is half a heart. You might want to convert your health bar to a bar with this. You'll notice I didn't upgrade the health though when we level up because I'm still thinking that's like a discoverable in this game. But I think that's pretty straightforward because you can just update the max hit points and it does that if you use the function we've got. But let's, that's an aside. So, okay, so we're good. We can already test this with the goblin. Let's go to our player script. And we're looking at this take damage. So what did we say we want to do? Let me put in a comment here that describes this functionality. A simple damage calculation that subtracts the defense value and will keep the damage to a minimum of 1. So we'll do a check to allow 0 to still be passed by a hurt box if needed. And now I added that last comment. I didn't talk about this because remember we've got the possibility, like our player uses this where he can have his sword and it will do like the damage effect on an enemy but not actually subtract any health. We might want that same effect on a player. I don't know. So let's account for that just to be safe because it's simple. First we'll just check. We've got, right, we pass in a hurt box and we do some stuff here. Because we're going to be doing more with the damage, I want to actually start by storing the damage since we're going to do a couple checks. So I'm just going to say variable damage is an int and it's going to equal just the hurt box dot damage, right? Just like that. And then I'm going to take this code here. I'm going to move these comments right up above that because we need to do all of our damage special calculations right before we update the hit points and do the damaged emit. Okay, so we start by getting our damage. And then the next thing we want to do is we'll check. So if the damage is greater than 0, this is the situation in which we're going to do our damage calculation. But if it is 0, then we're just going to pass over this. We'll go down to update hit points and do that, okay? But if not, if it's greater than 0, then we're going to do a little algorithm. So we'll just say damage equals, and I'm going to use this clamp integer function. So if you recall clamp integer, you pass in a value, and then it'll clamp it to a minimum and a maximum that you provide, okay? In this case, the value that we want to pass in is going to be the damage minus our defense. Okay, because we're going to reduce it. But the minimum is 1. We don't want it to be able to go lower than 1. And the maximum, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to put damage in here. The maximum is not important in this situation, although you might find a reason to put a different maximum in there. So there we go. Now we've got a damage value that's going to subtract our defense and it's going to clamp it. So in the case where we have our goblin who does 2 damage, now even at level 1, his spear is only going to do 1 damage is what should happen here. And so in fact, we might want to beef that up a little bit. But that's the simple algorithm. And then we just need to come down here to our update HP, and instead of doing this negative hurtbox.damage, we'll just use this new damage. Whoops. We'll just use this new damage value that we've calculated, and there we go. Okay. So I want to just make this easier to test a little bit more. So we do need to go back to our goblin maybe. Let's take this attack hurt box with his spear, and I'm going to change this to something big like 4. Okay. So let's go ahead and run the game. 4 is not going to kill me, right? Yeah, I've got a few hearts. So right now he should do... Dude, are you stuck on the wall or you just don't know what to do? I'm over here. I'm over here. There we go. Okay, so dang, that was a strong poke with 4. It shook the screen quite a bit. You can see it only did 3 chunks of health, right? Because each one damages a half of a health. That's because we have a defense of 1. So now let's load the game. Here we've leveled up. Now our defense is 2. So theoretically, he should subtract 1 heart instead of 1.5. There we go. Yeah, 1 heart. Very good. And then if I come over here, like this guy, he will still do 1 damage, even though, right? Even though the defense is 2, he's still doing a damage. Now, I guess one thing I want to do here is that screen shake is going to get out of hand. And this was not something I really anticipated, but it makes sense. So I think we've got our defense working, and that's good. Unless you decide you want to do something different, right? But that works. But the reason this is shaking so much is we've got this player damage signal that we're emitting. I'm going to find this. Where else are we hooking to this signal? And if we look, we've got our wizard boss, our stun state, on our player. And I think what we want to do is look at our stun state. Because in our stun state, you can see when we enter the stun state, we shake the camera according to our hurt box damage value. And previously we had assumed that maybe, you only do 1 or 2 damage, but now our damage value could theoretically become quite large, right? If you passed in 100 here, then that's going to be a huge screen shake. So what we want to do is we probably want to clamp this camera shake to a maximum. And, there's a couple different ways we could do this. We could pass in that damage value. We could change how we calculate the shake camera right here, right? And in fact, maybe we want to do that. Where else do we use the hurt box in here? Let me do a search. We use the hurt box a couple different places, right? We get the position of the hurt box. Yeah, okay. An alternative way that we could do this is we could just clamp the value within this. Like maybe we know that the camera shake. In fact, let's look at the shake camera function. Boom, there we go. Maybe we want to limit it in here. I'm going to actually limit it here. And I'm just going to do a simple clamp. I think we're always passing in integers. So we'll pass in the trauma, and we'll do a minimum of 0 and a maximum of maybe 2 or 3. I don't know. Let's try 3 and let's see how that feels. There's lots of different ways you could handle this. This is probably the simplest way to let the camera handle it. And it's the cleanest, I think. Okay, there we go. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good strong shake. And it killed me in 2 hits, so seems appropriate, right? But there we go. So now we've updated. We've got player that can level up. We've got experience points, leveling up. And our attack and our defense are going to increase. And so there we go. Pretty straightforward and pretty simple. And I think it's a good, clean approach. Hopefully this helps you guys figure out how you want to implement this kind of a mechanic in your own game. And in the next video, we're going to spice it up a little bit because obviously there's no indicator when we level up. We'd like to do that. And I'd like it so that maybe we display some damage numbers or something like that so that our new stats and our new attack feels even more meaningful as the game progresses. So thank you everybody for following along. If you enjoy the content, please give me a like. Subscribe to my channel if you're new and you want to see more of what I'm doing. And of course, thank you to all my awesome Patreon supporters. You guys are the best. And as always, we'll see you next time.